typical single person, after all is said and done at the end of the month, has the average of £23 left over in disposable income. Compare that to a couple who have an average of £280, more than 10 times more left over at the end of the month.
Cost of running a home for a single person probably comes out on average at around £7,800 per year for a single person. But when you look at couples, the costs are only just over £6,000 each for them.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Mouthy Money podcast. Today we're going to talk about the single person financial penalty. Now I've got some really interesting stat to kick us right off with, and this is from investment platform Hargreaves, Lansdown. Typical single person, after all is said and done at the end of the month, has the average of £23 left over in disposable income. Compare that to a couple who have an average of £280, more than 10 times more left over at the end of the month, which is an extraordinary figure. So to unpack that today, we are joined by Helen Morrissey, who's Head of Retirement Analysis at Hargreaves Lansdown. And I'm also joined, as ever, by my good co-host, Chris Chute, who is Head of Consumer Finance at Communications Consultancy, MRM. Helen and Chris, good morning.
Hello.
Morning.
Helen, thank you so much for joining us today. As I said, we're going to be looking at this single person financial penalty, and it's quite a wide-ranging problem, and from Chris and at my perspective, both of us are in relationships. We are both married, and our memories of being single people are perhaps a bit more dim and distant. But these numbers really stood out to us because, let's face it, there are lots of single people out there, and the financial struggle of living your life in that way is real, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, as you say, you think about the costs of running a home, running a flat, whatever. And, you guys mentioned, you're married, that should usually mean that there's two salaries coming in to try and split those bills. Whereas if you're a single person, you are having to manage all of those costs on your own. And that makes for a real month by month struggle. So again, like recent data that we got from our savings and resilience barometer shows that the cost of running a home for a single person probably comes out on average at around £7,800 per year for a single person. But when you look at couples, the costs are only just over £6,000 each for them. So when you think about that, it's the bills, it's the rent, it's the mortgage, it's the food, the going on holiday. Consider that starting to make a real difference over time, and that's really impacting people's day to day.
Yeah, so we're going to look a little bit later. There's a couple of really interesting and perhaps less thought of issues with the single person financial penalty, particularly to do with what happens when you go through a breakup, because that's a significant rupture in someone's life. We're also going to look at some stats around single people and investing, because there's a growing issue there. Chris, I know, as I said, you're married, I'm married. What are your recollections of being a single person and the financial trials that brought with it? I have a couple, but they're probably quite silly, I guess.
It's like you say, it's probably in the dim and distant past now. What I do remember, I'm particularly thinking with this investing point on, was, I was quite lucky in my 20s to kind of move relatively quickly up the career ladder. So I found myself with a little bit more disposable income. And a lot of that went on what I was expecting someone in their 20s to spend that on, I suppose, living in central London, which was kind of going out and socialising and spending time with friends and all that kind of thing. But when it came to planning for the future, there didn't seem to be as much of a catalyst for me to do that. I didn't necessarily think further than maybe a 12-month horizon on that. The only thing I vaguely knew was that I wanted to save up to buy a property one day. And so I would save, but I would save into a cash account that had a very low interest rate, just because it was like, well, I'll just park that there and we'll worry about it later. It was only when you start to sort of I started to make this sort of plans about, actually, I might want to settle down, and what does that look like? And I took the time to kind of look into the practicalities of that. And then realised that actually I probably should have been investing that money and would probably have better returns, but at least I'd saved something. And then because you start to earmark specific things, or I did start to earmark specific things for that money once I realised that there was another person and we'd had conversations about what the future looked like. Until then, it was kind of let's just make sure there's something available for me to be able to do something when I want to, but I don't know what that is. I don't know where that is. I don't know who that's with, that kind of thing. If I had one regret back then, it wasn't the kind of going out and enjoying myself. That was part of how I ended up in a relationship in the first place, old school. But I think it's also more, well, actually, if I'd have been a bit more pointed about making the most out of that, then perhaps I might find myself in a slightly better position today.
At the sillier end of it, with the kind of single person penalty, the one thing I learned when I kind of moved to London is when you do your like weekly grocery shopping, and you learn that supermarkets design everything for a family of 4. You can't go into a supermarket and buy a burger patty and a burger bun. You have to buy 4. You have to buy 4 burger buns. So it's basically, if I want to make burgers at home, I'm going to be eating them for 4 days. It's very prosaic, but it's the weird stuff that people come up against. I think for me, and the thing I think about now actually that is different for me, and I really sympathise with for single people is comes down to, if I were too sick to work, or I lost my job through redundancy or something like that, or had a loss of income, things would be really hard. But my wife, she's on maternity leave at the moment, funnily enough, but she works for a living as well. So I would have a little bit of a safety net with her in the first instance. A single person doesn't have that to fall back on. And when I was younger and I was single, I also didn't have family to fall back on. If I had lost my job for whatever reason, or lost my income, it would have been, and I was lucky that never happened to me, but it would have been really devastating for me because I didn't have that kind of safety net, and that's really difficult. Really keen to hear from anybody who's following on today. What are your experiences of it? Are you in a relationship now and happy to not be single because of the penalties that come with it? Are you single, and how do you get along? Do you have plans in the background to prepare for that kind of eventuality? Helen, what about you? What are your experiences of it? And just tell us a bit about your thoughts on it.
So, I am single, and I will say to you, Ed, that the burger bun challenge is real. As you say, you're going around that supermarket and you are very aware that things are packaged, if not just for couples, but certainly a family. And sometimes you have to look at things and go, am I going to get through that before it's gone off? Or is it going to waste my money? As you say, it's those day-to-day challenges. I mean, going back to what Chris said there as well, is that I thought you made a really interesting point about the discussion aspect of, you getting together with your partner, now your wife, and actually having those conversations about the future. And again, what we have found is that people who discuss their financial challenges or goals with somebody else tend to be much more financially resilient than people that take on that burden themselves. And that might be because, as you say, you might only have the vaguest of ideas of what you want to do, and speaking to somebody clarifies that. So what I would say is, like, even if you are single, I was kind of lucky, I'm single, but I've worked in this industry, so I've always been able to, bounce ideas, off people. And I think, again, Ed, what you were saying there about safety nets as well, about potentially losing your job. And that is a very real fear, I think, for the single person, because, as you say, it's not only a case of you've potentially not got that other person's income to rely on if you were to lose your job, but because you've got less set aside, less savings, less investments, you're probably also less likely to have the necessary protections in place, like the income protection, for instance, that if that did happen to you, that you would have that safety net there. And single people, it all comes down to less money at the end of the month, and that impacts every aspect of your financial resilience.
That less money at the end of the month, I think, is kind of really key here, and obviously quoted at the start those figures of typical single person has £23 left over, while a couple has 280. Now, 280, that's a decent contribution to a ISA, isn't it? 23 quid, that's maybe I get an extra takeaway or something like that. The difference really is meaningful on that long-term planning ahead for your future basis, isn't it? There's a huge difference there. And I remember that actually, because when I was single, I didn't really save anything. I only really meaningfully started to save actually when I met my now wife, and we started saving together into a lifetime ISA. But Helen, you've got some interesting figures around this, haven't you, on the investing side of things, just how big that differential is. That just talk us through that and what the issue really is there for single people.
Yeah, so I mean, as you say, if people have only got actually on average that £23 left at the end of the month, that means that people's day to day, it's on a razor thin margin. So as you say, you're going to be thinking about, what do I do with that money? And as you say, for some people it might be the extra takeaway. Others, it might be, try and save it. But as you say, it's at risk of being whittled away quite a lot. The investments that, people might not want to, certainly like lock it away in a pension, for instance, where they would be able to touch it till 55. They might be very worried about investing it in case the markets go down and their small amount of hard-earned money, for a time is reduced. Again, like, the data that we've got shows that 48% of couples invest, and that compares to 32% of singles. As you say, it's that risk element of it. And, for some people saying, this money is mine, I need to look after it. And for some people, it might just be a little bit of a step too far for them to say, I'm going to invest it, where there is that potential that it might go down, albeit, over the long term, it would undoubtedly, it should rise again. But, that's a long-term issue that some people might not feel ready to deal with at that moment.
Yeah, it's so tricky, isn't it? Because it's not immediately apparent how you resolve it, other than, I mean, I guess it's something that gets talked about a lot, is making the cost of living easier for people, increasing your earnings as much as you can to try and ensure that you've got more left over at the end of the month in order to make those longer term savings commitments if you're able to. We're always all about the sort of key rules of thumb of what you should be doing, having that rainy day fund up front first. That has to be your safety net as a single person, doesn't it? And then it's the next step. Make sure you're contributing enough into your pension. The workplace is a good place to start with that. But then beyond that, having your investment ISA for the longer term. And we know people generally don't invest enough. We're not a great nation of investors. We're a nation of savers, aren't we, Helen? There's that kind of overarching issue too.
Yeah. No, we absolutely are. So, as you say, we've done lots of research into this, and we don't quite have the investment habit of, say, other places like the US, for instance. And I think what it comes down to is, misconceptions about investing. So we've done a lot of research over the years where we've said to people, is your pension an investment? And a lot of people say that it's not. And it's kind of quite interesting that once you say to people, you are an investor because you have a pension, you are investors in these stock markets. And once people understand that, their level of interest does go up. And so we need to kind of get those kind of messages out there early. I think also what another kind of leap into the investment world for people might be, and this is for parents, in that I think while you may not necessarily look to yourself in terms of investing, once you have a child, you might be thinking, well, I want the best for them. So maybe look to get me like a junior ISA or something for them. Now, if you start investing on their behalf and see how that behaves over time, we often think that can be a really good introduction into the parents then going, well, actually, I've seen this and this has done quite well, so maybe I should do it for myself.
Now, but there is one final area I think we want to just talk about, and I think it's something that perhaps one day might be a podcast episode in and of itself, because it is a big issue. It's something that we've covered in the past around divorce day and that sort of thing. Because when we talk about single people, it's not just young single people who haven't found their partner yet, right? This also is people who've gone through a breakup, people who've had a marriage breakdown. It's a very important area as well, because older people are also finding themselves single. And let's face it, there is a reality as well where people lose their partners, might be widowed. And it's something that I think people wouldn't be prepared for it as well in the same way, because you're not thinking primarily about your finances. But there's some really important points around that, isn't there, Helen?
Absolutely. So I think one thing that I always say to people, what I found personally, is that a lot of people will have been like in a long-term relationship. And a few things can happen there, particularly if one partner earns more than the other. There can be a potential for you to say, well, we're going to be together forever. They've got a great pension, therefore I don't need to put quite so much into mine. And as you say, if you continue to stay together forever, that might work out really well. But if you split up, you could find yourself coming very close to retirement with very little in the way of pensions. Added to that, if you were to cede a lot of your financial decisions to your partner and you then split up, I've known many people that really struggle to manage their finances when they've become suddenly single, not just in terms of the fact that their costs have gone up, but also in terms of that day-to-day management of their money as well. What I always try and say to people is, wherever possible, try and build up your own savings, investments, pensions, because Not only, if you stay together, brilliant, it means that you've got more for the pair of you. But if you do split up, at least you've got something that you can fall back on. And as I say, even if you stay together, you've got the independence that comes with having your own money. Another thing I wanted to add, you talk about like divorce and stuff, is the whole thing around cohabitees. Because some people, for whatever reason, they don't want to get married. But what they don't realise is that they could be together for many years, raise a family together. If they were to split up, they would have no automatic rights to their partner's money. So if they're not named on the mortgage, for instance, they might not have any rights to that home. If their partner was to die, if they're cohabiting, they might not have any right to their pension. And that can come, at what is already a really difficult time. That's a further financial hit that can really cause chaos for people.
It's interesting, Helen, that's literally a conversation I've had with my wife this week, actually. So with her SIP, so she's got a workplace pension, but she's been contributing into her SIP, and I sort of logged on. We had a little bit of a let's check in and see what's going on, and then it was like, well, okay, this is great. In theory, we should have two funds that we can both rely on when we head towards retirement, but actually, we need to act as if we don't have that, so that we both take our pension saving extremely seriously, and then we think that will get us to a higher level in terms of where we're at, rather than the complacency of, well, actually, you'll take care of me, or vice versa. It's actually, well, no, let's make sure that we're going full tilt at this as individuals, and then we'll come together later when the time comes, and hopefully that'll be enough.
And I think it's really important to have those conversations, Chris, as a couple as well, because I think it means that you can work out what you both want your retirement to look like, and to have that visibility as to where you are on that journey, because you don't want to get to a point where you think that your partner, your husband, your wife, whatever, is putting a certain amount away and that you're well on track, and then find out for whatever reason much closer that you're nowhere near on track, and then you've got to make some quite difficult decisions about how you live your life.
That's my problem. Except the other way around. My wife has one of those NHS pensions that when she gets the statement, it's like, oh, it's going to be worth how much when you retire? Okay, great. I don't need to worry then. That's not probably
you need to worry, Ed.
Yes, I know. It's probably not a good
to that pension.
Way. But I don't think I'll ever be able to generate the kind of income that she gets told that will be generated out of hers. And obviously fully aware that the NHS pension goes through semi-regular downgrades in terms of the quality. They seem to change the settlement every 10 years or so to make it slightly less good. And actually, frankly, when you try and get an estimate out of the system, and I've looked at it with her, it's a bit of a bin fire. But I think that point is really, really interesting, that you need to almost think like a single person, because that makes you fight harder for it. I think that's really nice, Chris. And I think that's something that everybody should take away. Even if you're single or in a couple, you need to make sure that you are both, or if you're on your own, that you are ready for these things down the line. Retirement is such a hard thing to mentally visualize and prepare for, because it seems like it's something that's a long way away. But you don't want to get there and realize that you didn't do enough. And I think that's perhaps the thing that we want to help people make sure that doesn't happen. Basically, that's what we want, everybody to have happy, comfortable retirements. But you have to plan for it. You got to make a plan.
Absolutely. And as you say, even just checking in every so often, whether you're single, coupled up, married, whatever, checking in every so often. What have I got? What's that likely to get me? Am I on track? If I'm not, you've given yourself time to do something about it, and that's really, really important.
Like I say, anybody who's interested in this discussion, please do let us know in the comments. Send us your emails. Do let us know your thoughts on it. Do you have any strategies as a single person, or even as a couple? Have you got it in the back of your head what you might have to do if you became a single person for whatever reason? We'd love to hear from you, so please do get in touch. I think that about wraps us up. Chris, thank you as ever.
My pleasure.
And Helen, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, I shall say thank you to the audience. So please do tune in and subscribe. With that, I shall say goodbye. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.